that, we recognize that they got it all right for a while, and then they became complacent. The name of this sermon is, They Should and They Did Know Better. Books are full of stories about people who have become complacent and it was followed by disaster. There's a story about Brinks, where they kept all the money in Boston. And it was legendary for the security. It was like a fortress. You could not break in. But in 1950, a group of men broke in, stole almost $3 million, and got away with it scot-free. There was no way to trace them, and they only caught them because they did other crimes, and they were caught for those other smaller, pettier crimes. And the truth came out, but they never were able to get the money back. Very little of it. And the point is that they were running on the legend of their security as opposed to real security. They became complacent. The scientists at Chernobyl, a nuclear plant, had some rules but not enough, and they didn't even follow the ones they had. And when they were investigating it, they came to the realization that it wasn't if there would be an explosion, it would be when, because they were so lax, so complacent. They were investigating the Wuhan lab, where people think that the coronavirus started. And whether you believe it or not, what they did find was that labs have ratings, 1 through 5. And they were supposed to have a 4 rating. Their security was supposed to be 4. And as they investigated, they discovered that they were actually doing security of a facility that was 2. Your dental office, when you go to the dentist, they have a 2 rating for security. And so what was happening is they became complacent. And whether you believe it escaped there, you know for sure that they were being complacent. They weren't looking after what was supposed to be happening. Men who escape from prison, one of the things that they do is they watch for complacency. They say, oh, that guard never locks that door. I have access to that place. And they take advantage. They did an audit at the Maricopa County in Arizona. And one of the things that they found out was the Dominion voting machines were bought in 2019, and they were supposed to have security updates until the election came, but they never had any. My home computer, because it's hooked to the internet, Microsoft sends me updates, and they update my computer. At work, they do it every day. But they hadn't done any of it. And what's worse is that everyone shared the same password. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to have your own password so that when you go in, they know exactly who's been in and who did what, because it's your password. Anyway, they found in the audit that when they finally got the machines, somebody had deleted all the stuff that they needed to investigate the day before, but they had no idea who did it because they all shared the same password. Now, I don't understand computers a lot, but I recognize complacency. A high percentage of the things that we do have passwords. You have a bank card, you have a Visa, whatever. The passwords are supposed to be high security. A lot of people use 1, 2, 3, 4. Or they use the word password. This is my word. My password is password. People who steal cards know that there's 10 top passwords used in all of North America, and they just start from the first one and go down, and by the time they get to the 10, they've hacked most people's cards. I remember when I started Apex 32 years ago, or 31 years ago, we sold Stanley operators. And they had little dip switches that the first thing you're supposed to do is change those so you get a code that no one else has. But if you went down the street with the factory setting on your remote, you'd open half the garage doors on your street. No, never changed. There's passwords. There's these really fancy security systems where you have a camera mounted up in the corner of each room, and you can access it from your cell phone, and you can see what's going on in your house. The problem is they came with a factory preset password. The first thing you're supposed to do is change it, and people don't. And so thieves drive along, and they put in the password, and oh, there's a house that hasn't changed the password. Now they sit out front of your house, down the street, and they watch what you're doing, and they wait till you leave, and then they change your password that you were supposed to change, so you have no access, and they rob your house. And you get back this thousands of dollars of passwords, protected software, and everything is not longer yours. You just got to throw it out. Well, I brought up all these examples because it's easy to forget to be careful with security on a personal level. If we get it wrong, we're not going to create a worldwide pandemic or blow up a nuclear facility, but it can cause us harm. Well, what about if that complacency is in regard to worshiping God and ignoring it? But in this story is about people who had clear instructions from God, and as you read through the story, they were doing it, and then they weren't doing it. They messed it up. It was as if they had the most important job in the nation. It was as if they had the key codes to the nuclear arsenal, and they lost them at a poker game. God called them to this high calling, and they were doing it by the seat of their pants. Now let's look at the text. Number 1, obeying the command of the Lord. Leviticus 1-5. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, take Aaron and the sons with him, and the garments, and the anointing oil, and the bowl of the sin offering, and the 2 rams, and the basket of unleavened bread, and assemble the congregation at the doorway of the tent of meeting. So Moses did just as the Lord commanded him. When the congregation was assembled at the doorway of the tent of meeting, Moses said to the congregation, this is the thing which the Lord has commanded to do. Now, Moses was commanded to do this, and he got it right. If you remember, throughout the 40 years of him serving the Lord and serving the people of Israel, there's only one place where he got it wrong. He hit the rock instead of talked to the rock. And in this case, he got it right again. He didn't delay. He didn't procrastinate. He obeyed quickly. Verse 4 says, Moses did just as the Lord commanded him. He got everyone together and told them what was going to happen because it was the command of the Lord. Now, sometimes powerful people take credit where it's not theirs, and if there's a problem, they blame somebody else. I have a story about Mactaquac Dam. A number of years ago, I designed and built a really big door at the potash mine, and everybody had to travel out through this door, but it's not safe to walk under a large vertical lift garage door because it can fall and kill you. It has. And so they wanted a safety stop to keep it from happening. So I designed it, they built it, and everything was good. And so Mactaquac called me up and said, look, we can't keep people. The safety committee has reminded these people over and over again, don't walk under this door. It's 20 feet by 20 feet, 3,000-pound door. It's going to hurt if it hits you on the head. So they said, can you come up with a safety stop? Or do they make them? And I said, well, I designed one. And so I sent it off to them. And they sent it to Sunny Corner Mechanical. And the guy at Sunny Corner Mechanical called me and said, Peter, this is your design. I want you to get credit for it. If you want to build it, we'll buy it from you because it's yours. See, he was being very careful not to take credit that wasn't his. So I said, no, you go ahead, you build it. I'm happy for you to do it. You see, in this verse, in verse 5, Moses was telling the congregation that this was what God had told him to do. This wasn't their initiative. Aaron and them hadn't had a meeting and said, we're going to do this. It was God told him to do it. If you remember, sometimes this wasn't the case. Aaron had done this in Exodus 32, 2-4. Remember, Moses was up on the mount for 40 days, and the people came to him and said, where's Moses? We don't know where he is. And so he tells the people in verse 2 to give me your gold rings. In verse 4 he says he took this from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made it into a molten calf. And they said, this is your God, O Israel, that brought you from the land of Egypt. And then in verse 22, after Moses comes down, he said, verse 21, what did these people do to you that you have brought such great sin upon them? And Aaron said, don't let your anger of the Lord burn. You have peopled yourself. You know how they're prone to evil. And they said to me, make a god for us. And then he goes on to say that he took the gold and threw it in the fire, and out came the golden calf. His problem was, not only did he not take the blame for something he did, he passed it on to the fire and the people. And you remember Saul was told to wait until Samuel came, and he didn't wait. And he blamed the people. In this part of the story, there was none of that. Moses and Aaron and his sons did exactly what the Lord commanded. They did it right. It was perfect. Number 2 is get a bath and get dressed. In verse 6 it says, and Moses had Aaron and his sons come near and washed them with water. And then it goes on to explain what he covered them with. And in verse 13 it says, next Moses had Aaron's son come near and clothed them with the tunics. So they were supposed to get washed in front of the people. And God was saying, this is how holy I am. He had the 5 people washed in front of the entire congregation. And you wonder, this would be something that the people wouldn't see every day, but they would understand that this would be something that happened all the rest of the time throughout the history of Israel, that these priests would have to bathe before they came before the Lord. That's how important it was. This is what happened. This is how holy I am, God is saying. You wonder about the second most powerful man in Israel is being washed by the most powerful man. And what a humbling experience that would be. But I got to thinking about that, is that people would understand that the priest would be the cleanest person in Israel. And if you came to a priest and said, I have an offering to give to the Lord, and he was dirty and smelly, you'd recognize that either that God wouldn't listen to him, or he would bring disgrace upon God, because this was what he was supposed to do. If you're going to come before me, you're going to be clean. You have to do this. Well, once they were cleaned and dressed in these sacred garments, you have to think to yourself, these are special garments. They were designed and sewn to God's design, and they were done perfectly, as best as people can do. And all of this was done to honor him. Everything about this service in the tabernacle screamed, we honor God. You remember, they made incense. I read in verse 10 how they put incense. That incense was special. God gave them a formula and said no one in Israel is allowed to make this incense. It's only to be made for the temple. And if you made it, you would be killed. There would be no one who would take that incense and say, I don't know if you've seen this, you can buy online the secret formula for making Kentucky Fried Chicken. No one was selling the secret formula in a little vial of incense that you could buy in the corner of anywhere in Israel. This did not happen. But it happened in other religions. If you remember, Paul and Silas got in trouble with Demetrius, the silversmith, because they were making idols. It says in Acts here, Acts 19, there was a man named Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines of Artemis, was bringing in no little business to the craftsmen. You see, what was happening is they were stealing the honor of Artemis to make money. But this was not to happen in Israel. The garments were not to be copied, and the incense was not to be copied, because this was all made to honor God, and you couldn't do this. Well, number 3 is please don't die. In 31 to 36, it says, Then Moses said to Aaron and his sons, Boil the flesh in the doorway of the tent of meeting, and eat it there, together with the bread which is in the basket of ordination, offered just as I commanded, saying, Aaron and his sons shall eat this. The remainder of the flesh and the bread you shall burn on the fire. You shall not go outside the doorway of the tent of meeting for 7 days, until the day that the period of your ordination is fulfilled. For he will ordain you through 7 days. The Lord has commanded to do what has been done this day, to make atonement on your behalf. At the doorway of the tent of meeting, however, you shall remain night and day for 7 days, and keep the charge of the Lord, so that you will not die. For so I have been commanded. And Aaron and his sons did these things which the Lord had commanded through Moses. Now, from verse 14 on to 30, it was all the sacrifices that they had done for themselves. You see, they had to prepare themselves to offer sacrifices. God had chosen them specifically for this task, but they were sinful men. As you know, the story of him making a golden idol after he knew that that's the one thing you can't do. So they had to be blameless, and this was done by offering sacrifices. Well, after the sacrifices were done, they were to eat some of that, one of those sacrifices, the ram, and the bread, and stay in the temple for 7 days. Now, one of the commentaries said they would have done another sacrifice each day, and so they wouldn't just eat on the first day and go with no eating for the rest of the week. But I thought to myself, I asked the question about them offering a sacrifice and then eating some of it. And what was the meaning of eating some of that? I wanted to know. And I went through 10 commentaries, and they skipped that. They just went over it. No one said, why were they doing this? Except one. And they said that one said that they were a human stand-in for God, and when they ate the sacrifices, it showed that God had accepted this on the people's behalf. This was God's sacrifice, and he allowed them to eat it as a picture of him accepting it, and the rest went back to God and it was burned. Now, This was their swearing-in ceremony before God and the nation. God was doing a new thing, and they had to take this seriously. If they failed to do this, then they couldn't go on to... See, this whole thing, they built the tabernacle, they built the ark, they built all these things, and they were the human piece of the puzzle. And if they didn't do these things, well, then none of it was all for nothing. None of it would work. They had to be there, they had to do these things, and not only would they not be there, they would have died. And Moses couldn't be more clear. Do it this way, and only this way. This is the way it has to be done. And if you don't do it that way, there's a death penalty. It reminded me of what Joshua said at the end of his life. Choose this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You see, each one along these ways, Aaron and his sons and Moses were saying, we have chosen to do what the Lord commanded. Number 4, praise God, it all worked. In verse 9, verse 22, it says, and Aaron lifted up his hands toward the people and blessed them, and stepped down after making the sin offering and the burnt offering and the peace offering. Moses and Aaron went into the tent of the meeting. When they came out and blessed the people, the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. Then fire came out from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the portions of fat on the altar. And when the people saw this, they shouted and fell to their faces. See, chapter 9 was their first day on the job. Chapter 8 was their ordination. When I send guys out to install for Apex, and it's a big commercial site, and Bird or Acadian Construction is running it, there's a safety orientation. They have to sit and watch a video or sit in front of somebody who tells them, and they know what to do, the safety. They know how to operate on that site. There's different rules on different sites. Well, chapter 8 was the safety orientation for Aaron and his sons. Now they're allowed to do the job which they were ordered to do. All of chapter 9 is when now they could do this, and now they offered the sacrifices for the people because they had done it for themselves. And it was a sacred task, and one that shouldn't be taken lightly because they were doing this for the Lord. And here, of all places, God would be honored. This is his temple. He would be honored here. He would be treated as holy. Now, there's certain jobs that require people to be sober-minded. Somebody was telling me that at the Riverview, where they do the plane comes in, what's that called? You worked there. Air traffic control. Well, when there was no planes flying, they laid off 75% of the air traffic controllers, and now the planes are flying. They called them up and said, okay, you need to come back. Well, they've got other jobs. He said, if you want to be an air traffic controller, now's the time, because they're crying. But you have to be sober-minded. There's no joking going on. When you go to an airport, you can't say, I got a bomb with me, or you will go to prison. You have to be sober-minded. And they were called to be sober-minded. If it wasn't you, if you weren't a sober-minded person, you better change, or you better get another job, or you're going to die. Or you're going to disgrace God. If you remember, Eli's sons, when the story of Samuel came, Eli's sons weren't obeying God, and Eli had been warned by God, if this doesn't change, if you don't fix this, they're going to die. And then they did. And Samuel had 2 sons, and they didn't obey God. And what happened when they didn't obey God is people said, we want a king. If you don't get it right, it causes big problems. Now, they had done what was required for them in verse 8, and they'd done it perfectly, and now they were able to fulfill the requirements of the priesthood for the people. And God came and showed them that he was happy with it. They followed the very particular requirements demanded by the holy God, and now God had accepted their work, the job they were doing on behalf of the people, and he showed up to let them know it had all been worthwhile, and they basked in the glory of God. And I should stop there. But I read the next verses. Number 5, just watch, I know better. It's chapter 10, 1-3. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took their respective fire pans and put fire in them, placed incense on it, and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. The fire came out from the presence of the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, "It's what the Lord spoke, saying, by those who come near me I will be treated as holy, and before all the people I will be honored." So Aaron therefore kept silent. Now, Aaron's 2 sons decided they knew better than God about how they were to honor him. And more likely, they just repeated the sin of Cain. I'll do what I want instead of what you want. They flaunted their high position, and in their pride, they failed to be humble servants. There's a way to do things and a way not to do things, and they chose the way not to. We understand that we need to do things the proper way. I was doing my sermon, and somebody called up and said, "I need you to go across town and get my registration." And so it's at night, it's dark, and it's rained, and everything is pitch black. And I came across Connaught, down Morton, past the university, and I went around as that little turn. There's a bicycle. A guy on a bicycle coming the wrong way, no light, and dark clothes. And he's right there. If I had went like this and switched on the wipers on the back, I would have killed him. Just 1 minute, 1 second of not watching. He had a job to do. He had one job to do. Drive your bicycle safely. I saw 3 more bicycles that night. The other 3 went through a red light at night, in the dark. Now, I was upset and scared because I had to cut into the other lane to avoid him, and I didn't know if there was another car in the other lane. I didn't have time to react. They had one job to do, and it could have cost them their life. Well, the job of offering incense was for the high priest only, as we read in chapter 16. Aaron could do it. He was allowed to do it, but there was very specific things he had to do. He had to bath. He had to put on special garments. He could only do it in this particular way. And if it had been the time of the year, once a year, he would have been doing it. But Aaron's sons just decided, this is what we're going to do. And not only that, they offered strange fire. And that was also condemned. You see, if you read on, in chapter 16, he went to the altar and took coals from the altar and put it in his pan, and then he put the incense on it. Any other fire was strange fire, was not allowed. And they knew this. And so they died. And if you continue reading in chapter 10, God sent their cousins in to bring them out and bring them outside of the camp and bury them. And when they were killed, their body wasn't burned up, and their clothes weren't burned up. So here would be these two men being carried outside the camp with these beautiful, beautiful clothes. And I thought to myself, I don't know if you've ever made something exceptionally beautiful for somebody and they haven't treated it with respect, and you're just furious. Well, it probably took 4 months for somebody to sew these gold embedded garments for the priests, and now they were going to be buried because they were defiled, and there was nothing you could do about it. It'd be like a knife to your heart. But it would have the effect of showing people that God says, I am to be honored. Says, by those who come near me, I will be treated as holy. And before all the people, I will be honored. And if not, these two got buried outside the camp. So what's the application for us? We understand that we don't have to do this. We can come before the Holy Spirit every day, anytime. There is no washing beforehand. Well, in the Christmas story, John's father, Zacharias, was doing that particular job, and they had a rope around his foot. And if he went into the Holy of Holies, and it's this once a year, and he's got the sequence out of maybe he's going to die, and he has the rope, and knowing that this. And I thought to myself, this is a job that you do with fear and trembling, that you're going to get it right. And then we go on a little while farther into Acts, and it talks about Ananias and Sapphira. They lied to the Holy Spirit, and Peter told them off, and he got the last word because before they could speak, they died. It's important, and their purpose was to show that people who were Christians were called to a higher standard. The Bible also says that pastors are called to a higher standard. You are overseers. You're supposed to do this well. But you know that the Ananias and Sapphira, what they did has been done and worse by all sorts of people throughout the history of the church. What we need is more people to see God as high and lifted up. We think, well, all we think about is mercy, mercy, mercy. God is very merciful, but He's also holy. And how you treat God as holy is going to be something that you're going to have to work on. You're going to have to say, I'm going to read my Bible, and I'm going to find out how God wants to be treated as holy. And I'm going to do that thing. Lord, I know that you are Jesus is my brother. I am special. You have saved me. You've done all this stuff. But you are still to be treated holy, and I want to know how I want to do that. Please show me in your word so that I can honor you. So that I can do, by those who come near me, I will be treated as holy. And before all the people, I will be honored. That verse, though it's the Old Testament, it still applies to us. For those who come near me, I will be treated as holy. And before all the people, I will be honored. I'm not saying that how that will work for you. What I'm saying is, we have to do it. We're called upon to treat God as holy. And how that happens, you have to figure that out. One way we do that is we have communion. And that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to have communion, and we're going to treat God as holy because He told us this ordinance to do, and we're going to do it.